doing something in the Atta Galatta, and I hope there'll be many more to come, actually. And lovely space. Audience interested in poetry, I can see. So it's going to be, I can already foretell that it's going to be a good evening. But meanwhile, let me introduce Denis Mair, who holds an MA in Chinese from Ohio State University, has taught at the University of Pennsylvania. Is currently a translator for Zhongkun Cultural Fund in Beijing and a research fellow of Hanching Academy, Sun Moon Lake, Taiwan. He translated autobiographies by the philosopher Feng Youlan and the Buddhist monk Shih Chen-hua. So you can tell, right? The way I pause and then this is something that I sort of crammed at the last minute, just telling him I should completely fall flat on my face pronouncing these names, many of which are quite unfamiliar to me, and I suspect many of you as well. His translations of modern Chinese poetry include works by Jidi Majia, Mai Cheng, Meng Lang, and Luo Ying. He's currently translating a prize-winning book of art criticism by Zhu Zhu, winner of a China Contemporary Art Award. Denis Mair's own book of poetry, Man Cut in Wood, was published by Valley Contemporary Poets in LA. So now I hand over the mic to one of the mics. The other one is still getting its batteries fixed, to Matt Anderson here, who will sort of kickstart the whole process.
Thanks for having us here. My name is Matthew Anderson, and it's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to be here with my uncle, who over the years I've seen him spend time in Taiwan when I was young, and time in China and Beijing. And then in Seattle I saw him develop his poetry and really take off with it, obviously. And, so it's just a special thing for me to be here. What we're going to do is I'm going to ask questions. Denis is going to elaborate on my questions and read poetry responding to these questions as well. And then we'll open it up to questions from everyone here. So, Denis Mair. Just sit down. First question, Denis. For you, why China?
Several people have asked me that in the last few days. I was interviewed by Bhagashri S. from the Hindi. I don't know who scored that publicity coup, but she asked me, why China? Why did I decide to study about China? And I come from the Midwest, Ohio, from a small town outside of Canton, Ohio. It's a steelmaking area, and the only reason I can think I got an interest in China is, well, for one thing, my older brother is a China scholar. He's pretty successful. He teaches at the University of Pennsylvania. He's 10 years older than me. His name is Visor Press. And if you Google his name and a site called Sino-Platonic Papers, you will see an excellent collection of oddball scholarship. He edited his own series of papers, and many of them are by independent scholars who are interested in the interaction of China with the rest of the world throughout history. So there are many papers in that series that have to do with interfacing of China with other cultures. And of course, my brother's interest in China and my interest in China also make us interested in India. But I got interested in China partly because I come from a place in middle America, in Ohio, that is the opposite of cosmopolitan. All the immigrant population that came to Ohio became very American, and the values are white bread, vanilla, middle American values, and I was interested in something else in high school, but my teachers in high school did not encourage me So immediately when I got out of high school, I wanted to study something that would give me a quick access to the larger world. So I was a biology major, but I took Chinese as my language because I figured that was the furthest possible away I could get away from Ohio.
Except we were living in Canton, Ohio, which is named after Canton, China. That side.
Yeah, that's about it.
Have you studied the Tang Dynasty classical poetry?
Yeah, I studied in graduate school. I was very interested in classical Chinese literature, but I didn't do a PhD. I got out in the world and worked. I got to know a lot of Chinese artists and poets. So the more I got to know the real living article, I got less interested in the dead poets. But I'm glad I studied some of the Song Dynasty and Tang Dynasty poets because it gave me some kind of foundation to see what the modern poets are doing. And I do have a classical poem I'd like to read you by Du Fu. Maybe you've heard of Du Fu. The gentleman who's interested in couplets, he would admire what Du Fu did. Because Du Fu was a great writer of parallel couplets. And Du Fu's couplets were parallel, like the first couplet in a verse would be parallel to the next couplet. So they had to think about not just parallelism of lines, but parallelism of couplets. So he was good on things like that. But he was also a very forward-thinking poet. I'd like to read a poem by Du Fu, Watching Fishermen. Fishermen of the hazy river gather at dawn, spread nets to haul in the lunging school. Skillful boatmen race against the wind, tridents pierce the crested wave. Countless fry squirm from the nets, beached in deathly heaps they twitch. Lunkers droop and fade away, with nose down their tails lash in the air. Viewers consume a second day of treats, push back platters and finish off the wine. This evening the river dragon goes to a new lair. Fish under these peaks will follow his storm cloud. Endless battles are raging over this land. Where have our unicorns gone to? Why does my kind take pleasure in this? The sages mourn to see such desecration. This was written, I'm forgetting Du Fu's dates, but he was alive during the 8th century, 700s. It was written in Chinese, classical Chinese poem. And I've translated about 60 poems by Du Fu because I taught a class in Chinese literature and translation. What's the next question?
Why do we know so much about the visual art of China, but not so much about the poetry?
Well, a big-time Swiss art collector called Uli Sig had a very good collection of modern Western art, including many original Picassos. And he made a conscious decision, very astute decision in the early 80s, to sell off half of his collection of Western art and transfer the money into Chinese, mostly Chinese art, Asian art. And Uli Sig, moving into the Chinese art market, caused other people to follow him, and he kind of made the Chinese art values take off. And so there's an art bubble in China, and I'm one of the people who's subsisting off of the crumbs from the table of the Chinese art bubble. I translate some art criticism for art catalogs in China. But because of all the investing and the international presence of Chinese artists that became famous, were collected by these large collectors, because of this, you hear about them, but you don't hear about Chinese poets because Chinese poets, they have a big responsibility within their own linguistic area. You know, Chinese media and Chinese press is not open. Chinese poets, it's up to them to articulate a worldview, alternative view of things. So they're more focused on writing about what they see and do, and not actually, their language is so different, it's hard to cross the gulf and do the kind of translation I'm doing. You know, I'm busy translating, so I cannot go find publishers in the US. So it's like you have, if you get it into the Chinese language, maybe you will be very busy with that, and you can't become good at finding publishers. But I have found a few for my friends.
In China, where are publishers? Are they published there, and what kinds?
Well, this book, I translated this book by nationally famous poet in China. He edits a magazine called Poetry Monthly in China. Until recently, he resigned, but this book was published by a small publisher in Hong Kong. I sent his material to some large presses in the United States, but I did not manage to get my friend, I didn't manage to find my friend a mainstream American publisher. And the same goes for this. This gentleman, Meng Lang, I also translated his book for a small press in Hong Kong. And he is one of the founders of Independent Chinese Pen. The Chinese writers who don't fit under Chinese Pen organization, they applied to Pen International to have their own independent chapter. So he's an important guy for what he did. He also edits an online journal called Freedom to Write. It's in Chinese. But I also was not able to find a mainstream literary publisher for him in the US. But I'm getting better. I'm finding some.
Yeah. Is there a difference in the literature which is getting published from Hong Kong and within Central China?
Oh, definitely. Hong Kong still has free publishing. So there are small presses, like this friend of mine, besides being a poet, he runs a small publishing house called Morning Bell. And Morning Bell publishes books critical of the Chinese system. They're kind of exposés of problems in the Chinese infrastructure. And the books he publishes in Hong Kong are prohibited in mainland China. So it's very good that Hong Kong has this window of publishing freedom.
Dennis, do you think that eventually Hong Kong won't have the freedom of press and freedom of literature?
You know, there have been a couple incidents where editors and important reporters for South China Morning Post that were critical of China in their editorials, they have been pushed out because the ownership of South China Morning Post has to show its friendliness with the mainland. So the South China Morning Post was a very independent voice, and maybe it's being called to toe the line a little bit. Some of the editorials in the South China Post have been critical of the students who occupied the central district.
Are Chinese poets still writing political poetry?
Well, that's a good question. Discourse was so politicized in China after 1949 that maybe some people became disillusioned with political poetry. They feel that the Communist Party depicted itself as the spokesman for the people, but actually the people maybe do not feel anymore that the party is their one and only spokesman. So people are not interested in writing Marxist-style revolutionary poetry or poetry to exalt the common man and the worker. People want to explore something in their poetry similar to modern poets everywhere else. Some problems unique to the modern world, or universal problems. And if there's politics in Chinese poetry, it sometimes comes out in the critique of our situation, our existential situation, of which politics is a part. So I'd like to read one poem by my friend Yan Li, who's active in China now. He wrote this poem in 1985 during a period when he was publishing an underground journal. It's called A Dog Poem for Tomorrow. Tomorrow, a dog that only goes wild after death, clamps the world in its jaws and won't let go. Poems of tomorrow. Tomorrow's dog skins will still be hung. Tomorrow's dog skins can be hung any old place like a shirt, but tomorrow's dog skins will be shed by dogs. Tomorrow, a dog of an orbital satellite, having shaken off its tail, wagged to cinders, will go off into space to be human. Ah, tomorrow, I too will have such a tomorrow, so take advantage of today, before the sky, as wide as the solar system, is chained by a pack of dogs. Holding my shadow in my mouth, from where sunlight is, from out of lamplight, and even from enchanting moonlight, I have come out forever. So there's a little bit of politics in that he doesn't buy politics. You know, his grandfather committed suicide. His grandfather was a famous Chinese doctor in Shanghai with a great collection of books and paintings. And as a young man, he grew up with his grandfather. As a young man, he saw the Red Guards, the radical leftist teenagers. They came into his grandfather's courtyard and spent the whole day burning books and paintings, and also mistreated his grandfather. Shortly after that, his grandfather committed suicide. So he's very ambivalent about any kind of political values that somebody tries to put on him.
Is it the kind of the cultural revolution?
Yes, yeah. So, but I can give you another example of a poet who writes something that touches on something political. This man, you would call him maybe a dissident poet because he's in Hong Kong. He never wanted to leave China. He was so involved with culture in China as a publisher of Underground magazine in the 80s. He just was called in for interviews with the police so many times that he figured it was interfering too much, so he found a way to leave China, and now he's married to a woman in Hong Kong, so he can stay in Hong Kong. But this is one of his poems, Silence in China. Silence